Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. We are live. Good morning, people of LinkedIn. Good morning, Paul. We're live on LinkedIn. Please do not swear.
I certainly won't.
Good morning. Do you know what? I think in all of the time that I've been doing this, and we're now coming up to almost 3 years. I need to do a proper count to sort of see exactly when we hit it. I've only had one person drop an F bomb, so so we're doing pretty well. And they said it very quickly, and I don't think anybody heard, but
It happens, obviously, doesn't it?
It does. But yeah, it's Paul, it's really good to have you with us. And good morning to anybody else that is joining us live on this very cold morning. I don't know how the weather is where you are, Paul.
Well, I'm in the loft of our house, and I've just opened the blind, which is just above me, thinking, oh, I'll
Yeah.
be able to see the sky, but it's frozen. It's frozen solid. So it's frosty. It's a cold, frosty start, but it's a beautiful start out there. It's not raining, which is a
Yeah,
bonus, but I think that's coming later.
exactly.
I saw the forecast
Ah,
is
yeah,
looking really. It's really messy this weekend in the UK.
yeah. It's a frosty but bright Friday. So
Yeah, which is
thank you
what we
if
like.
exactly. So thank you if you are joining us live this morning. Paul, I've started a little bit of a tradition where
Mm,
I ask ChatGPT to write your introduction, and then you get to score it out of 10. We were
I
just
love
talking
that.
about AI, weren't we?
I
And
love that.
based on what I've been doing the last few days, you're
Right.
probably not surprised by this at all. So today I'm joined by Paul Modley, chair of the Social Mobility Leaders Forum and managing director for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion and Belonging at AMS. Paul leads the forum that brings together senior leaders who want to accelerate social mobility across the UK. At AMS, he looks after the global DEI strategy and has worked across sectors including banking, government, and consulting. He also has a long track record of building programs that open up opportunity, including his work leading recruitment for the London 2012, that's me, not ChatGPT, 2012 Olympic and Paralympic Games. I'm really pleased to have him with us this morning. How did it do, Paul? Out of 10, how did Chat do on its intro?
You know what? I'm a big supporter of ChatGPT. I think that was a pretty good introduction.
Amazing.
If I was marking that, I'd probably mark it
Yeah,
9 out of 10. Yeah,
incredible. We're off to a good start. We're off to a really good
absolutely,
start.
absolutely.
And we were just talking off air, and we may talk about it. It may come up, but I was just talking about the fact that I've been building an AI agent this week, which is my first, so it's very interesting. We've got a few good morning in the comments, so let's just see who is joining us. I may need to put my specs on for this now. Adrienne, good morning. Good morning, Adrienne Arenzi. Hopefully I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Good morning. How is the weather where you are, Adrienne? I'm really keen to hear. Arad, I'm going to say Riceberg.
Yeah.
Good morning, Arad. It's sunny. Sunny in London, I believe, is where you are, Arad. So good morning. And Sylvia, Anna, good morning. Morning both. And looking forward to this conversation, as am I, Sylvia. I don't think we've really delved too much into social mobility. I think we've covered it once before. So yeah, I am really looking forward to this. Sylvia, where are you joining us from as well? I'd love to know. Yeah, great. Paul, so social mobility. Just tell us before we sort of like dive into some of the questions and themes. What sort of brought you to social mobility as a almost like a sort of like niche area within the sort of broader spectrum of inclusion?
Yeah, I think for me, it really started when I worked on the London 2012 Olympics and Paralympics. And I was lucky to get involved at a very early stage in 2007. And much of what we were doing in the London 2012 games was really about connecting to the communities where
Mhm.
where the Olympics and Paralympics were taking place in probably the most deprived parts of London,
Yeah.
Newham, Greenwich, Hackney, Tower Hamlets. Really, really
Mhm.
difficult. And if you think about where the Olympic Park was, what it looked
Mm.
like, I remember turning up there in 2007. just seeing this terrible old industrial site. So that's where it all kind of started to connect to me about, certainly about the power of the Olympics and the Paralympics and how we could use that to really connect to different communities and to drive some change. And what we knew with the Olympics and Paralympics is that we had jobs. We had hundreds of thousands of contractor jobs, permanent jobs, and volunteer opportunities. And we wanted to give opportunities to people who ordinarily wouldn't get involved in this sort of thing as an opportunity for them to, have some great experience that they could then take forward. So that's where it all really started. And then when I started to think about it, it kind of made sense to me because of my own background. I come from a very conservative, small, old mining town in South Wales. Both of my parents didn't go to university. I was the first person in my family to go to university. And then I thought about, well, it kind of makes sense because it's me. I come from that background as well. So that's where it all started.
Yeah. That's so interesting because it kind of almost talks to, and I know something that we're going to get into this morning is the business case around, for example, social mobility, social impact. And the fact that the way that you explained it there, that when it came to like the 2012 games in London, and I'm guessing, we've got a few people this morning from London that have joined us. When they think about some of those areas, it's almost like the reason for doing it was kind of staring you in the face, like literally, like you were in an area that had this kind of like, you could see the social deprivation. So it made sense to start thinking about, how do we make sure that we include, others that maybe don't get those sorts of opportunities, and also your own background. So there's definitely something there. And I think also we're 6 minutes in and there's already some key takeaways in terms of also there's something about, when we experience something ourselves or, or we can link it to our own experience. And so when we're thinking about, for example, if you've got senior leaders in your organization that you're maybe trying to get bought into, the rationale for inclusion, if you can somehow link it to perhaps an experience that they've had, it doesn't have to be identical, right? That it's sometimes easier to kind of get them on the bus, if I say that, or get them understanding why it's important. Yeah,
100%. And I think that sort of the storytelling, people's own experiences, and being able to talk about that, I think it's incredibly powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning, Junior Beeman. Good morning, friends. Junior's going to be on LinkedIn when I'm going to have some more friends on in a couple of weeks. Happy December. Happy December. It's I think you were saying before we came on, it's what is it?
3 weeks.
20 days to Christmas or something like that. Wow.
Yeah, I know. This year really has flown by. It's incredible.
It really has. It really has. So So thank you all for joining, those of you that are in the chat on this cold and frosty December morning. So we're diving into social mobility in terms of the rationale for social mobility, what it is, etc. For those perhaps that haven't even come across it as a definition within within this work, inclusion, equity, diversity, etc. How would you define social mobility, and then also link to that this broader context of social impact that I would say I've probably heard more in the last maybe 3 to 4 years than previously. So how would you define those terms?
So I think social mobility, it's sort of broadly, it's someone's background in terms of perhaps where they were born, the postcode they were born into, the type of school they went to, what their parents did as a job or didn't do, whether they had free school meals or not. That sort of background shouldn't impact your future potential or how you sort of how your career develops. That's in essence what we're talking about, and we know in this country that that's not the case, unfortunately. And despite lots of kind of great efforts and focus and lots of organisations, lots of people like me, and I know some people on this call, Arad, who's part of the Social Mobility Leaders Forum, you're all working really hard to kind of move the dial. We know that in this country, we still have a long way to go, and many indicators we're going backwards rather than forwards. So the focus on social mobility right now is so incredibly important. And sadly, I was watching the news this morning about child poverty. 1/3 of our school kids are in poverty. That just kind of can't be right. That just can't be right. And that, through no fault of their own, that will now impact their ability to kind of move forward. So, yeah, that just blows my mind, even now when I think about it. 1/3 of school kids are in child poverty. That doesn't sit with me at all. So that's what drives me, to kind of really make a difference with social mobility. So that's how I personally look at social mobility. And then when we talk about social impact, and again, I really like the term social impact, and it's probably something that, like you, 3 years ago started to resonate with me. And it's a term I think that's come from government. That it's really come from the kind of procurement within government, and they wanted to use social impact as a way of assessing deals that they were doing in the private sector or with third-party organisations to assess how, through that procurement process, what that company was delivering to government or providing to government departments, how that was going to deliver sort of impact in the sort of environment or in the community where they're operating. And it's a term now that we're starting to see sort of seep across into the private sector as well, which I think is amazing. So it's an opportunity for organisations to put a value on the impact that they're having through through kind of the diversity, equity and inclusion project or initiatives that they're delivering, supporting the community, the environment that they're supporting. And in the current world where there is so much pressure, there's a focus on the pound and the dollar that we're spending. If organisations can measure the impact of those programs that they're delivering, well, again, that has to be a really good thing.
Yeah, I mean, let's dive into that measurement bit, because and it's interesting actually. I don't think I was aware of the link into, for example, procurement and almost like that, maybe like as its origin. So that's really interesting. And I think so. If we just dive into measurement, which I know is something we talked about when we had a prep conversation. Why is measuring social impact important in the current climate? But then why do some people feel uncomfortable attaching numbers to DEI work? So this is, what some people describe as almost like it gives them the ick, right? When you start to add numbers to DEI work. So just talk about, why the measurement is important, but why some people sometimes feel uncomfortable about this aspect of almost like the business case and maybe not even liking that term.
Yeah, I think for me, why it's important, what I've seen, particularly in the last 5 or 6 years after the terrible circumstances with the George Floyd murder, what we saw after that was a lot of global organisations probably going too far in terms of investing in people, over-investing in teams, DEI teams, over-investing in programs, initiatives that really didn't make a difference. And what we've seen probably in the last 9 to 12 months, particularly with the new US administration, is that real backlash against DEI, which is really starting to seep out, not just in the US, but we're seeing it in other parts of the country. We're seeing it in the UK with the swing to the right, and there's definitely more pressure and more noise in the system. And as a consequence, we're seeing investment in DEI dropping. It's probably dropping off the board agenda a little bit from where it was, say, 3 or 4 years ago. And so I think this gives us an opportunity, and I'm really trying to grab it to demonstrate the real value of DEI to businesses, to boards, because senior leaders do like to talk about numbers. They do like to kind of have that equation. So if I invest in that much, it's going to give me that much. Then we've got to be able to talk that language with senior leaders. So I personally think it's a really positive thing for us to be doing, given the current climate where, money is tight, resources is tight, and we've got to fight really hard to demonstrate the value of what we are doing. And yes, some people do get the ick when you talk about the business case. I think that term is too tired now. We shouldn't probably use that term about the business case of DEI, and everybody still rolls out the McKinsey report or the Deloitte report or whatever. All of the professional services firms have done some kind of sort of research on this. So I think if we ditch the term the business case, talk more about value, then I think that's more for me. That's a good term. That's a positive term. And we absolutely shouldn't be afraid to talk about the value of what we're doing, whether it be social mobility or DEI broadly.
I like that. I like that idea, actually. Maybe ditching the term business case for 2020. I like that, because there is something about, and I did this at the start of 2025, and maybe I'll do something for 2026, but I think that, and I see Adrianne's point here around DEI as theatre and performance, but I think there is something about, and even the acronym DEI, right? We've kind of, this work has sort of got a little bit lost in acronyms and terms where people have sometimes lost the meaning of it. And so, as you say, the business case, that even just that term became synonymous with a McKinsey piece of work that did or didn't prove X, Y, or Z, right? So I think you're absolutely right in terms of just putting these things back into plain language. And when I think about I don't know what term when I think about the value, right? Let's not use the word business case. I always talk about these two elements, and I used to talk about the one being, the right thing to do, which is the one that some people like to hang this work onto. They're like, this is just the right thing to do, right? It's what's fair. And then the other one is where the potentially there is either like some monetary or other tangible benefit that we can attach a measure to. And from my perspective, a bit like you were saying, I think you meet people where they are. Whatever is needed to kind of get people over the line to start understanding what's necessary and actually driving the right behaviors. That's the tool that you use, right? That's the lever. Is my view.
Yeah, and I think in the world that we operate in, you have to. And I love that term. You meet people where they are, and you use language that is appropriate, and you flex your style. And I find that working in a global business like ours, I can develop a global strategy around DEI. That's really easy for me to do, but making that appropriate in Poland or Mexico or China or the US or Canada. That's where the challenging bit is, and you really then have to drop down and really think about the regional and the country-specific nuances.
Absolutely. Arad, I'm just going to circle back through the comments because I can see there was a question from Sylvia. I'm going to come back to that. Arad's put a link here. What is the business case for social mobility? The human case, I call it. Arad, I'm loving anything that's got the word human in at the moment, right? Even though I am a lover of AI and all of that stuff, but anything, I'm like, let's amplify let's put the humanity back into a lot of 100%. Things that we do. So I love that, the term the human case. Sylvia had a question here, which I think is interesting to just get your thoughts on, Paul. So how do you think the new government bill on universities' fees will affect access to education and social mobility? So if universities will still have a role to play with the fast emergence of AI. What's the new government bill? Maybe I'm not up to date with my news over the last couple of weeks. I've had visitors. Do you know, Paul, specifically what Sylvia's referring to?
I don't, but it'd be good to understand. I know Arad works in the university space. Okay. So between Sylvia and Arad, they could.
If one of you could just clarify in the comments, and then maybe Paul, just your thoughts generally. If I just rewind a little bit on university fees. I mean, I don't think anybody can forget. Let's not talk politics, right? But many years ago, when things like grants, etc., were abolished, I think people were quite surprised when it comes to university education. However, given the conversation that we had just before we went live, and given the new environment, with AI and things like that, I do wonder I just wonder whether university is the be all and end all, unless you're going to be like a doctor or something. Do you know what I mean? I don't know. What are your thoughts on the role of university in social mobility and
Really important.
looking
Yeah, yeah.
future? Yeah.
Yeah, really, really important. And we've got to, I think we have to talk differently to kids when they're coming through school. University is not the be all and end for everybody.
Yeah.
There are so many different opportunities out there now. Apprenticeships, amazing. Degree apprenticeships, practical apprenticeships,
Yeah.
and so university is not right for everybody. But university can be an amazing place for some people to go to develop their skills further, develop the kind of technical skills they need to. And absolutely, there's such an important role for universities to think about AI and the impact of AI on future careers and future skills. As we were talking before we went live about there was a LinkedIn stat, and I will get this wrong, but just in essence, what they're saying is by 2035, there will be sort of 30 or 40% of the skills that will be needed then. We don't even know what they are right now. So, that presents a challenge for all of us, but particularly for universities and schools in terms of developing young people for the future. If we don't know what those skills are right now, how on earth are we, developing and thinking about the education that they need? So it's a fascinating kind of time to be in education, to be in business right now, because things are changing so quickly with the emergence of AI, and that can be scary, but I think it provides so many opportunities. Let's think about this positively. Yes, it is going to change a lot of people's jobs, and it will sort of remove some jobs, but it will create an awful lot of new jobs, and that has to be exciting for the young people of today. But we have to make sure that someone's background, where they were born, the fact that they maybe haven't had access to an iPad or a computer shouldn't preclude them from being able to kind of jump on that bus. And so we have to all think about social mobility, and universities are doing some great work in terms of, supporting those different communities to enable young people who potentially didn't have that option to go to university before to kind of create those sort of flows through.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you were thinking there, you reminded me there was a term you were talking about, what are the kinds of things that universities are going to need to teach to equip, young people, especially those, for example, from deprived backgrounds. That because one of the gaps, this is maybe something we can pause on momentarily. There's a lot of conversation around this thing called social capital, and I think where I've sometimes seen that. When I've been working maybe with individuals that are, say, younger in their careers and in their years, they haven't necessarily had exposure even to all of the types of roles that there are out there. That is often one of the biggest barriers, right? They don't even know what roles there are. But so there's something for me with universities around learning agility as one skill in terms of how fast can we adapt to our environment and learn new skills, but also opening the mindset, broadening out the perspectives. And that might mean that, university maybe in its first year looks very different. A bit like, I know sometimes people have talked about the US system where maybe you don't sort of allow people to narrow down too quickly. Do you know what I mean? I don't know what your thoughts about that are in terms of could that help with social mobility, just by broadening the perspectives of young people?
Yeah, definitely. And there's some really good work going on. There's so many charities in our world right now that are supporting young people from deprived backgrounds to kind of give them the skills to kind of to help start to build that social capital. We ran an event through the Social Mobility Leaders Forum about 6 weeks ago, where we brought 25 young people from all parts of the country into London for an all-day conference with 25 different employers as a way of really kind of breaking down the barriers of a recruitment for young people moving from education into work. And listen, it was just incredibly fascinating for these young adults from 18, 19, 20, just turning up in the city of London, some of whom had never left. Like there was a young boy, Dylan, from Wrexham, never come to London before, never been into the city of London. And he just rocked up and he kind of embraced this, and we need to create these opportunities for young people to network, to meet with business leaders, and to build the kind of the confidence that they need as they go forward. I remember when I went to university, I suffered social shock for the first time, and it was a weird experience because I'd never met people who'd gone to a private school. I'd never gone to a formal dining room experience. So our university was quite formal. So we had to wear black gowns to dinner. And it's like, oh my God, this is really weird. Why are we doing this? You know, I came from this very small, very working class background. But then to be in this environment where I was mixing with people from public school whose parents were working in the City of London, it was like a social shock. I couldn't cope with it. I didn't know what to do. And then we're still seeing that. We're still seeing that with kids who are coming from deprived areas and expected to stand on the same stage as people who, you know, who have had that experience. They have had their parents who've built networks to them, opened doors to them. So, yeah, it's really, really important that we kind of create that opportunity for all to develop that sort of social standing.
Yeah, it's really interesting that term that you use there, social shock, and I've never heard that before. We'll talk about the barriers, but it reminded me. So my experience through I didn't go to university at 18. I kind of went straight into EY. So straight into the world of work, and that was a bit like you. You know, I had colleagues. We'd go on like training courses in the UK, and there'd be colleagues, all school leavers, so all A-level leavers from all over the UK. And many of them had never been to London, you know, literally, as you say. And that was kind of, you know, that was my sort of like routine. That was my experience. And there was often that social shock. So, you know, a bit like you, my background was, you know, council estate, you know, single parent family, all of those things. So you'd go to these like quite formal dinners, you know, with a partner or something. You wouldn't have a clue. You literally wouldn't have a clue what you were doing, what you're supposed to wear, all of these things. But interestingly, those things I remember if I fast forward in my career, some like 15 to 20 years or something, when I was now in a role where I was working for a CEO. So I was now, you know, I'd kind of gone through EY, qualified, all of that stuff, working for CEO. We were, the company that I was working for at the time sponsored the cricket. And we had a box. So there was a box at the cricket. And there were a number of us that worked for different CEOs of the businesses. And I remember one of my peers asking me what she should wear for this event at the box. So it doesn't change, like that social shock and that kind of almost like having to navigate, you know, what are the social norms for this situation? They can continue all through our careers, right? So just talk about something we talked about was those barriers and how it impacts even people at senior levels in organizations. So maybe just talk to us about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think there's so much emphasis on young people, and rightly so, because lots of young people have challenges and barriers that they have to get through. And that's great to see, but we mustn't forget the kind of, you know, the later stages of careers and that kind of getting on and moving through the organization. And there was a report done by, I think it was Boston Consulting Group recently, which demonstrated, I think they did a survey across their organization, which demonstrated the challenges around this topic for, you know, social mobility for people at more senior leaders in the organization, how they still think about it, and it kind of, you know, it can impact how they feel from a belonging perspective and feeling included in the organization. So we absolutely need to kind of prioritize, you know, keep thinking about people's journeys through the organization, because you're right, those you know, it doesn't, you know, I think it still sticks with me as a 59-year-old in the business environment. I still think about my background. I still have that imposter syndrome, like, you shouldn't be here, Paul, what are you doing here? And I remember you and I both worked at EY. I remember working at EY earlier on in my career, going back some time, and I got invited to a clay pigeon shooting event. It's like, oh my God, what is this? What do I do? What do I wear? Like, what do I say? You know, and it's like, and it was like, it was excruciating, the turmoil I went through in the run up to that, and it was an enjoyable. It wasn't for me. It was an enjoyable event, but it was just uncomfortable. And I still feel that. You know, when I walk into a room, full of senior leaders, and I do a lot of this, I
Yeah.
still feel uncomfortable. I still feel I don't fit.
Yeah.
I shouldn't be there. So lots of people are feeling that way.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, just as you said that, especially with us having come from the world of EY, right, professional
Mm,
services, because a lot of the, even when I think of, you know, a lot of the client entertaining and all of that, it
mm,
was often things that were quite elite. If you know,
yeah,
if we
yeah,
just explain like that, it was golf days, it was clay
yeah.
pigeon, and then, you know, I was doing a training session a couple of weeks ago, and I said, you know, we're coming to that time of year now where people will start talking about their skiing holidays,
Mm,
right?
mm,
And all of those sorts of things. And just maybe being a little bit more aware of, you know, some of those conversations. And, you know, and it's not to say that you can't have those conversations, but
no,
how do we have them in a way where you still can like make people feel included and it's not done in a way that's exclusionary, you know? But all of
yeah,
all of these things are social cues about who does and
yeah,
doesn't fit in, right? And if
yeah,
we're not careful, they create kind of in group and out group kind of
yeah,
division, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
100%, 100%.
yeah. Interesting. Let's talk a little bit about intersectionality and maybe
Mm,
why. I think there's something about why maybe social mobility is one of the reasons I think it's actually quite popular, or why we think it's a good one of the, you know, a fairly good identity or fairly good characteristic to focus on, is because it is quite intersectional by its nature, and actually we do potentially touch on quite a few identities. Do you want to just talk about that a little bit, maybe?
yeah, I think you kind of sort of hit the nail on the head there. It really does. Well, you know, social mobility, it impacts, you know, when you think about these populations that we're referring to, it's
Yeah,
everybody in that
yeah,
population. It's
yeah,
women, men, it's black people, it's white people,
yeah,
you know, LGBTQ, people of disability.
yeah,
So, you know, people do say, if you have a deeply embedded and a strong social mobility strategy, you will be impacting different protected characteristics. So inherently,
right,
when you're talking
yeah,
about social mobility, you know, you really are getting into that sort of intersectional space, which many organisations are trying to move in, because, you know,
yeah,
when you've got, like with us in our business, we have 12 global employee resource groups, and
hmm,
they're all doing amazing work. You know, whether that be the
hmm,
disability ERG or the neurodiversity ERG or our
yeah,
women's group, trying to get them to work intersectionally is quite
mm,
hard,
yeah,
because naturally they form community groups, and we've
yeah,
got some really good examples where they are coming together. But our social
hmm,
mobility ERG naturally kind of plays across all of
yeah,
the protected
yeah,
characteristics. So yeah, it's you know, it's been really interesting, because our social mobility ERG is one of our newest ones. We set it up
hmm,
12 to 18 months ago.
okay,
So it really is starting to support
yeah,
our real focus on
yeah.
intersectionality. And the other
And
thing about,
what kind,
oh,
yeah.
go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, what kinds of things does the social mobility ERG do? You know, so for some, my guess is that there might be quite a few organisations that haven't yet, or haven't got at all, or haven't even thought about having a social mobility ERG. So what types of things do they actually do, right?
Yeah, so we've really had to focus on a lot of, like, what is it? You know, what is social mobility, particularly in a business like ours, where, we operate out of, I think, 90 different countries. So
Mm,
it's an easier sell in the UK because people understand the term social
mm,
mobility. So we've had to do a lot of what is social mobility to our colleagues in Poland,
mm,
wherever, China. And that's hard. That's really hard, because the
yeah,
term social mobility doesn't translate well outside the UK, not even in the US. And we always make this assumption: oh well, everybody speaks English, so we should understand
mm,
that. Well, that's not the case. Social mobility typically doesn't resonate even in an English-speaking country like the US. So we've had to do just a lot of kind of, what is social mobility? Why is it important? What does it mean?
yeah,
Collecting the data. You spend a lot of time kind of, using our
mm,
ERG to encourage our colleagues in the UK, where we collect the data
yeah,
again, why is it important that we collect this
yeah,
data? Why are we asking, did you have free school meals? Because I think the questions are really personal. more so than the other protected characteristics. We've had to do a lot more work to get people to feel comfortable for providing that information. It's worked. We've got about 80% of our UK colleagues have now submitted their social mobility data, and we are using that. So a lot of that time has been spent on kind of laying the groundwork. But now just really weaving in and working across all of the ERGs to support them.
It's really interesting. Is this something that in the work, because I know that you're external facing as well, right? So you work with clients. So for example, because that question around the data, as soon as you started talking about, well, there's two things. First of all, the global strategy, which we're going to come into, but when you started talking about the data, immediately I started thinking, what data are they collecting? I remember I was asked to apply for something. This is many years ago, and I was asked questions like, did your parents go to university? Did your grandparents go to university? And I thought, they're asking social mobility data, which I thought was interesting. Is this something that you support clients with, talking about and or designing data like that? So for some of these trickier areas like social mobility, helping clients kind of understand what sort of data they should be measuring, and some of, I guess, like the cultural challenges with getting the data.
Yeah, and I always start with that. When any organisation, whether that's through the kind of client work I do or through the Social Mobility Leaders Forum that I chair, any organisation that is kind of really starting to think about social mobility, or they want to start to focus, it's really start with the data, start to collect that data, so you know what your starting point is, and there's a very clear parameters in place in terms of what data should be collected. And there's some great organisations who can support with that. So that has to be the starting point. Don't do anything else until you start to collect the data. And many organisations in the UK now are collecting data. It's probably the norm now, I would say. And many organisations are now producing social class pay gap reports as a way to understand what that looks like from a pay perspective, which is really, really positive. Clearly it's not mandated, but through the work that the Social Mobility Foundation is doing in particular, they produce the Social Mobility Foundation Employers Index, the top 75, every year, and they've seen this year in particular a big increase in the number of organisations that are producing social class pay gap reports. So that's a real positive.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really, just off the top of your head, and I don't know whether you know this, so apologies for springing it on you, but do you know how the social class pay gap, and I know there's probably not as much data, but does anybody have a sense of how that compares to things like gender pay gap and or ethnicity pay gap? Does anybody have a view yet as to which ones of these are the biggest? And I know that the gender one is complicated because actually for younger individuals, I know it's actually flipped, right? Young women are actually doing pretty well, right, in terms of pay in the UK in particular. Do you have a view as to where social class sits in that?
No, I think it's too early days, really, and I don't think we've got a broad enough sort of spread across multiple industries. Certainly, I would say the professional services, like the EYs, the KPMGs, they're ahead of the pack in terms of how long they've been producing their pay gap reports. So I think it's probably will need a bit more time to kind of get in terms of what is this really telling us? Do we,
interesting.
You kind of like, and I think the figures sort of back this up that there is a gap for those who who've not had that exposure.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I guess one of the reasons that I'm quite interested is, and we talked about it a little bit before, intersectionality. My guess is also that the social mobility lens isn't it's not only that it's intersectional, but it's probably and I might be leaping here, but my hypothesis is it's probably quite proportionate of some of the other major categories that we think about when we think about this work. So you are going to probably have a larger proportion of individuals from ethnic minority backgrounds,
100%.
Potentially also individuals with disabilities. There's going to be a skew, right? Because of so social mobility, again, that's why it's a great measure to be looking at and getting into. Let's talk about global strategy.
Mm,
Interesting what you said about the UK versus US, right? That the
mm,
language is different. I would have
yeah.
never have thought that. So let's just talk about global
Mm,
strategy and how
mm.
how do you even think about it? How do organizations, particularly global organizations, start to think about this as a global strategy?
Yeah, and I think it is changing. I would say in the last couple of years, it really hasn't been a global strategy for many
Hmm.
organizations. It has been a very deeply rooted UK strategy.
Yeah.
But I think that is changing, and I think that's changing for good. And I think what's happening in the US is forcing that change to a certain extent.
Hmm.
And certainly I've seen, and I won't name the organization, but an organization, a very well known brand, global brand that a lot of us will use, have put social mobility at the heart of their global strategy. And this has come from the US. This is a US
Nice.
based organization, but are now talking about social mobility and are using the term social mobility. So
Great.
I am really
Yeah.
excited by that. And I think it's probably happened because of the change in administration in
Yeah.
the US and the challenges around talking about DEI and
Hmm.
etc. And if you think about social mobility at its heart, it's about kind of creating opportunities um, to, for people at sort of lower levels of the economy to come through and better themselves. Well, that's the
Yeah.
heart of that's what the US was built on. If we think
Yeah.
about it, and so this really plays into, it's not about. It really is about the kind of supporting people. It's not, yeah, and it's different to and we're not going to, I think in the US right now it's really difficult to talk about equity, and so it's not about that, but it's about helping people to improve themselves, so that they can better
Mm.
themselves and better their families and better their communities. And I think that just plays into the US right now. So I think
Yeah.
we have a massive opportunity to really sort of bed social mobility across
Yeah.
the US. Um, I think the thing with the UK, why it works so well in the UK, is because we are such a class-oriented country. We have been for centuries, and so that's why social mobility kind of makes sense, because it's against that context. And then we
Yeah.
just need to think about it in other countries, India, where you've got the caste system,
Yeah.
that will it play in there? We're not seeing it yet, but
Okay.
potentially there's an opportunity. Poland, we have a big operation in Poland. It's interesting. We're having some good conversations about social mobility. So yeah, we're definitely starting to see it seep across
Yeah.
in our world anyway.
Yeah. I love it. I just think, the way that you've explained it there, particularly, and I know, if anybody else like me is going to be Googling to figure out who that US company is, but the thing is that when, with the whole DI backlash, it was some people calling it a strategic retreat, right?
Mm,
Because of what was happening in the US. But I think this, in terms of a sort of like renewed focus or a slight shift onto social mobility, I think is genius. Like, I think it's
mm.
such a wise and sort of clever
Yeah.
strategic move for DI teams. And it's not saying that you're forgetting about all of the other
No.
identities, but this is it's a relatively safe kind of like thing to lead with, and actually
Mm,
it will still, as we said, because of the intersectionality, it will still benefit pretty much every other characteristic, right? So
yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
great move
It is.
strategically for global organizations. Yeah.
And I think the other thing which we haven't talked about, which is really, really driving this and it's important, is the reducing birth rates that we're seeing globally in every country, with the exception of two or
Mm.
three in sub-Sahara.
Hmm.
So every major economy has reducing birth rates. We have an aging population, which is good. Medicine is kind of, we're living longer.
Yeah.
So, organizations need to find different talent pools, or kind of keep older people working longer, which is a good thing, which we're starting to see. But organizations need access to different talent pools that they
Yeah.
can't see at the moment, or they haven't got access to. So opening the pipe, it's a bad term, but I talk about this, opening the sort of funnel wider
Hmm.
to include sort of those backgrounds, those kind of communities that have been ignored for a long time, again, that's got to be a
Yeah.
good thing, because organizations will need to access more talent in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And potentially different kinds
Yeah.
of talents and skills,
Yeah.
as we were saying. So actually, when you think about the massive change in the future of and the nature of work, some of that around AI, but actually some of that, I think, in response to an influx of technology, more humanity, more human skills, perhaps more, dare I say, more spiritual skills. I'm just going a little bit woo-woo here. You do potentially want that much broader talent pool with a much wider range of lived experiences, because I think, none of us, I think, really knows exactly where this is going to land in terms of, the types of roles, the nature of work, the products, the services, etc. So it links back to what we were saying before in terms of, that value and that business case. And one of them is, and it's a real sell for any of this DI work, is being not only a really attractive employer, but also being able to reach the widest pool of talent possible, by actually tapping into some of these strategies. So that's incredible. We are wrapping things up now, because I know that people always complain that they've got a 9 o'clock meeting, and we always go over 9 o'clock, but it's fine. It's Friday. Take it easy. What for somebody that's listening to this, if they haven't done anything yet about social mobility in their organization, where would you maybe suggest that they start, or what's the one thing that they could do to maybe get this on the agenda?
I think just start having a conversation in the business. Try and find some people in the business who kind of this resonates with, it connects with. Try and identify a senior leader who can help you kind of take this forward in the business. There will be somebody in your business who this resonates with at a senior level. There will be somebody who hasn't gone to university but has kind of managed to develop their careers. So find that person, find that group of people, find your tribe, if you like, and really start to build it. And it will start to evolve very, very quickly. A kind of shameless plug for the Social Mobility Leaders Forum. We now have 120 members who are in the forum, representing employers, charities, policymakers, and the education sector. We've got some very big employers in there, but those sorts of forums are really good to kind of bring organisations together to learn and to kind of share experiences and ideas. Because what I find with social mobility is organisations are really willing to share. It isn't about kind of the crown jewels and I can't tell you what we're doing because that'll give you competitive advantage. I generally don't find that with social mobility, because we all have to work together to kind of break down the barriers that exist. So I do find that organisations are really willing to share their experiences and the good work that they're doing.
Absolutely amazing. I mean, you mentioned there the Social Mobility Leaders Forum, which I know you are chair of. So where can people find out more about that work?
So we have we're on LinkedIn. We have a page on LinkedIn. So if you search Social Mobility Leaders Forum and you're interested to find out more, just message us there, and somebody will get in touch or message me directly on LinkedIn. It's free membership. We don't have a membership fee. We're trying to be as inclusive as we possibly can be right now. But so please get in touch, and we can talk to you more about it.
Fantastic. Paul, we're gonna leave it there, but it just leaves me to say thank you so much for sharing it. It's been I've learned a lot and I'm sure anybody that was with us has also. So thank you to everybody that joined us. I hope we haven't lost connection, because I know that our comments have, I think, stopped working. So apologies if you have sent comments through and I haven't been able to see them, but I will be in the comments afterwards. But thank you. Also, if you've joined us on YouTube, because I know some people have joined us on YouTube this morning, and if you are watching on the replay, thank you for taking 48 minutes out of your day to join in this conversation. And Paul, where's the best place for people to connect with you? Is it here on LinkedIn, or do you live anywhere else online?
LinkedIn's probably the best place. I use X. I don't use X as much as I used to, but LinkedIn's the best place.
Amazing. Perfect. So if you've got any residual questions about social mobility, either for your organisation about the Social Mobility Leaders Forum, please do get in touch with Paul. And that's it. Thank you so much, Paul. It's been a joy. Oh, somebody's we've got a comment back. I think we're back. The SMLF is fabulous, Sandia.
Yeah, Sandia is one of our members, so it's great to have her on the call this morning.
It sounds incredible. Perfect. Thank you, Paul, so much, and to everybody that was watching. Please have a fabulous weekend.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Cheryl.